I made a bunch of these for Christmas, and I was asked to do a video on how I made them. It is string art. This is the outside of the card. This is the inside and the back. Nothing fancy. Well, it's kind of fancy. Anyway, here's how I began. I went to Michael's, or, you can find these at pretty much any craft store, and I found blank cards and envelopes to match the cards. They were just blank. There's nothing on them. They started out looking like this. This was flat. There was a crease in the center. You fold it when you're done. Then I went to Pinterest and I found string art patterns. This, I measured the area I wanted to do the pattern in, and I printed this out to the size approximately of my card. It didn't have to fill the space, but I didn't want it too tiny, and of course you don't want it too big, because then your thread's going to be on the outside of the card. So once I printed it out, I found a piece of foam. I got this from work. It's spongy. I'm sure you could probably do this on an old pizza box, as long as there's not grease or anything on it, of course. You can find foam packing of some sort. You can use something that's firm enough to put your paper on, but you don't want to poke holes in your table. So then I put my pattern down on the foam, and I put registration marks on my pattern itself so that I could line up my card underneath. And I taped this all down in place with Scotch tape, or you can probably use painter's tape. You don't want something that's going to end up tearing your paper up when you pull it off. I had to be very careful. So it's all lined up like that. And I'm not going to poke more holes in this card. Instead, I'm going to use index cards for this demonstration. Then I would take my card and place it underneath of my pattern, just like that. We'll just do a star on this one. If you use an awl, make sure it's an awl with a small tip, or you can use a big needle. I have a T-pin. I don't know if you can see that very well. I have a T-pin here that you can use as well, or your regular sewing needle. Depends on, how much finger strength you have or dexterity. Then I poked a hole in my card wherever my little dots were. Remember, this is a pattern specifically for string art. It was a freebie I found on the internet. I'm not even sure where it came from. You can buy string art patterns from different websites. So I have poked all the holes in the star. You pull the paper away, and you're left with these holes. Now, in the end, when the string is all strung on it, it will look like that. That is the same pattern. I did one ahead of time that will fit the card. It's a little smaller than the tree that I used on my Christmas cards. Now I have string in my needle. This needle is a little bigger than a regular sewing needle, just slightly bigger. It just has a bigger eye in it, but it's not so big that it's going to make my holes a whole lot bigger. I don't imagine it would matter much, but here's the package that I used. There are different size needles in it. It's just bigger than you use generally to do your hand sewing, because I have these threads. I don't use these in my sewing machine because they're very big, unless I want to do something like decorative buttonholes or couching it down, because it's about the same width or the thickness of like crochet cotton, maybe a number 10. It's not quite as thick as pearl cotton, although you probably could use pearl cotton in this. I would recommend using either a thick buttonhole thread or pearl cotton. So the idea is to make this look like this. So we're going to start with the green part. Now when you do this, you want to keep going in one direction, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. I turn this over and start down here at this bottom corner. Okay? We're going to pull the thread up through and leave a tail. You want this tail because that's how you're going to fasten it to the card. Then you're going to go up in a diagonal fashion to the top hole. You could do the top hole or go a couple down. It's not going to matter. It's just going to make a different pattern. If you remember the spirographs that you had as a kid, each one of those holes in the circle would produce a different kind of effect, although they would be similar. Now we're going to go in a clockwise fashion. Here's where I started at this corner, and up here at the end is where it's ended. We're going to go over to the next hole over. And place our thread going clockwise. I believe it's hard to know when I'm doing this for the camera. Alright, so we're going to go clockwise. Now this down here, you can either tape it with a piece of tape or just hang on to it with your finger while you pull this thread through. See how it looks on the back? And there's the front. Now I'm going to take this thread, and since I came out this side of it, I'm going to do the opposite end down here. So I'm going straight across the front of the card. Now here's how I anchored mine. Once I got that first pass through, I came down to the bottom of the card on the back side, and I just tied a simple knot. Now I don't trim these threads right away, because if you didn't get your knot very tight, it will come loose as you're sewing. Ask me how I know. Alright, so continuing on the back side of the card, you're going to go in the same clockwise direction. On the back side, it looks counterclockwise. So we're going to take it through the next hole up. Make sure you miss this thread. You don't want to stab it. You don't want to go on the other side of it. This thread will contain the long strands as you work across the card. So here's the back side. Here's the front. And I'm going to go across to the other side again and go in the opposite direction, or go in clockwise, the opposite side of the thread you came out of. Bring it in that direction. Pull it sort of tight, but don't tear your paper. If you pull too tight, you'll tear the paper. And then you're going to continue in this fashion, back in through the card. Get back to this side, going along the same line, so that it's going to make a crisscross. Come back in the next hole, pull it kind of tight, but don't tear your paper. Go back into the next hole, and continue in a clockwise fashion. You can see our pattern is starting to develop. Now, as you go along, you're probably going to need to add more thread. Just tie it like you did at the beginning on the back side of the card, or you can tape it down with a piece of tape. Oh, I did wrong. See, that was real easy to do if you're not paying attention. Going back to the next hole, across. Is this like watching paint dry yet? It can be very relaxing to do this while you're sitting in the evening watching television or just sitting around on a Saturday afternoon like I am. I am going to finish this corner and then probably move on to another section. Oh, see, I did it wrong again. It's real easy to tell. Pull that back out. Go back. I'm used to turning the card back around to myself to see it. I think that's why I've made that mistake twice. Who knows? So as you see, we're coming out pretty much, I did it again. We're coming out pretty much the same way we started, but on the opposite side. And we're just going to keep going around the corner. And yes, I've already gone in some of these holes. We're going to do it again. Because as we go around the corners, it's going to create this effect down here and over here. And we're going to continue doing this with a thread until we've gone all the way around those corners. Now, I'm not going to continue doing this because I'm going to show you how to do the other sections. So when you're done with the green thread, you'll go all the way around, of course, and it will end up looking like that. Can you see how that will happen? You just keep going in a clockwise or counterclockwise fashion all the way around the card. Now this pattern is slightly different than this one. We're going to add this stump. And I have green thread here. Not green, brown. I have some brown for the stump. And this was a design element that I changed when I downloaded this pattern. I'm going to start down here at this corner and come up here to the opposite corner, one off. This will create a starburst. See how it's got a hole in the center? That is because I started it like this. I didn't go corner to corner. I went one over and then went up to the corner. Now when this card is completed, the green is going to be in the same holes as the brown, unlike this one. This one was its own separate entity. You can make other holes here, or you can use the same ones the green would be in. So on the back side, I have my tail. I'm going to go clockwise to the next hole, pull out my thread, and go back in the opposite hole down here. It's difficult to do backwards. And then I'm going to turn it over and tie it. I did several different designs for my Christmas cards. I think this was my favorite. It was pretty simple but looked a little difficult, and It was easier to do than some. And you're going to go to the next hole, pull it through, and just as you did with the green, you're going to go in the opposite corners. Now as this one goes along, it's going to look a little lopsided at first. And this weird thing is going to happen where it looks a little off. But then you start adding into the holes that you've already added to before. Sometimes you have to follow the thread of the previous row to know where the next one's going to go. It can get confusing. See how I've already been out that hole? Well, this one hasn't been gone through yet. It's because we started one off. And we're going to create a little shape in the center. This is going to look more, see, I've almost lost where I go. If I pull this up, I can see. I'm going to go over here next. It will create a little, I don't know, it looks like one of those 50s atom type designs. Lost where I'm going again. Oh, right there. See how it's starting to look like a star? A starburst, I should say. Is that the right direction? I keep getting lost. I did get lost. I went in the wrong hole. There we go, I'm back on track. I think it can be very easy to become confused. When you're doing it backwards, that is. Just have to back it up, go back into the proper hole. I promise you it's not this difficult. It's only causing me trouble since I'm doing it backwards so that you can see what I'm doing. Alright, and go in this hole. And this is the final stitch. And then you can fasten it off by tying it to your previous tail, or you can tape it down, or you can glue it down. I am just going to leave it hang for now because we're going to do the star finally. We're going to do that next. This is another element that I changed when I started doing these. When I first did them, I would just do the outside one to make it look like a star that you would draw on a piece of paper. And then I thought it would be really cool to add extra layers. The original design only had these outside holes. I should have worn a different shirt. It only had these outside holes. I added these other two so that I could make a layered effect, like that. Here's how I started. You remember how you used to draw these stars in school? Or maybe you still draw them, I don't know. I bring in my thread from the bottom. I'm going to leave a tail like before. I'm going to go straight up here to the top. And then I'm going to jump across on the back side to the next leg. And you can go in any direction because you're going to go straight back across to the other side here. And then on the back side, you can go back up to the top. Pull the thread through. Draw this other leg of your star. Then you can go back up to this side, and I always use the pentagon lines on the back for my stars to help me keep track of what sides I've done. And you're going to go back to the opposite side to make this leg. Now you can tie it here if you want to. I'm not going to for demonstration purposes. It's just going to be quicker. Then you can go back to this side. See how my pentagon is forming on the back? See how it looks? Here's the front. And this completes the star from the original design. Now we could leave it like that, but I really like the way it looks with the layered effect. So I'm going to come back directly through to the next hole in the next round. Doesn't matter which direction I go, I'm going to repeat this in the next holes. I'm going to go across, jump to the next leg, come down, all the way across, jump to the next leg. Doesn't matter which direction I go, both directions need to be done. And I'm going to jump up here. See how it's starting to take shape? Then I'm going to jump across to the next leg. Bring that across down. Sorry if you can hear my washing machine going, it's laundry day. And then I'm going to bring it up to the next leg. I'm going to create another pentagon shape on the back. And bring it across to create that star. Alright? So the second star has been completed, and I'm going to make the third one. I'm going to go straight down to the next set of holes. I also think this kind of holds down the longer stitches and they won't be as easily caught. So I'm going to bring this to this side. Just whichever leg needs to be done. See how it's holding them down? On the back side, I'm going to go back up. Careful not to catch your previous stitches, because we're just making another layer of a star. Up to the next leg. Oh, we've already done that one a couple of times. So we're going to come down here. Don't catch the thread from the previous row. And bring it up. I have just one leg left to do. And there's my star. That's what it looks like on the back. There's the front. So when you have all of the stitching done, it ends up looking like that. Now, of course, if you look inside my card, it looks kind of nice and neat. Well, it's because I took a glue stick and I cut a piece of paper, just a plain piece of notebook paper, smaller than my card, but big enough to cover all the thread. because I didn't want to send this on the inside of my card. And I just glued the piece of paper down on all four edges. I ran the glue along the outside edges of my plain paper, and then on the stitching I just ran the glue across the stitching and then laid my paper down and smoothed it down to get all the air bubbles out so that it would hold my stitching secure. And if your holes are too big on the front, some of the glue could possibly squeeze through or ooze out a little bit, so you want to kind of be careful of that. But my stitching still kind of moves, but it's not going to pull out, at least not unless you really work at it. You got to really try to pull these out. But you can see they're still kind of free and loose and moving, but they're all glued down and held secure. Now, I realize that this is probably a lot of trouble to go to for something that somebody might throw away. I'm hoping people will save these, maybe cut around the design and punch a hole in it, maybe write some information on the back side of it, and keep it as an ornament. Or you can just throw it away. Either way, that's how I did it. Thanks for watching.